I'm super excited to put these two laptops head to head. The Asus Republic of Gamers Zephyrus G16 versus the G14, both Ryzen models with 32 gigs of RAM and the RTX 4070. So there could not be a more perfect head-to-head battle between two laptops that I'm thinking you are considering purchasing. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these through the paces of the performance benchmarks, the usability, the build quality, and all that's gonna take place in this video. So hang tight, because you're gonna get a full review of these devices. And at the end of this video, I think you're gonna be able to make a purchasing decision for yourself. Now, let's first and foremost dive into the build quality and usability. As you can see, they both have the slash on the top cover. They are all aluminum CNC chassis. So we have the top cover, keyboard deck, and the bottom cover, all of the CNC aluminum chassis. Now, the upward facing speakers are slightly different on each device. We're gonna have less speakers on the G14 versus the G16. So we're gonna have better audio quality coming out of the G16. And while we're chatting about it, here's an audio sample so you can hear for yourself. Now, before we get too far carried away, let's take a look at the bottom cover of these laptops. Since we know what the top cover and the keyboard deck now looks like, here are the bottom covers, and you can see the exact same design. They just have compacted it into the 14-inch model here of the G14. But we have the main intake vents along the bottom, 2 slots here, 2 slots here, and then pushing air out of the back of the device here, as well as the back side here. So that's where the air is going to come in and flush out. And we also have supportive speakers on the bottom cover as well. So the audio sample you just listened to, the audio is coming from both the top speakers and the bottom speakers. Now, as we go ahead and put the laptops up on their side, let's take a look at the port selection. You can see exact same selection: power adapters, HDMI, USB-C, USB Type-A, and headphone jacks. No ports along the back side. And then we have the other side, which on these two devices is slightly different. Micro SD card reader for the G14 versus the full-size SD card reader for the G16. And then we have USB Type-A and USB Type-C. So good port selection for each of them, slightly different. Now, when looking at the ports, there's one thing to consider with these two devices, and that's going to be the upgrade path. So one of the things I really like in the choice about which type of SD card reader to include, micro or full size, is when you look at the upgrade path on the G14, you have no ability to upgrade the RAM, and you only have one upgradable M.2 slot. So the M.2 slot, which houses the boot drive, is the only thing that can be swapped. Whereas on the G16, we have 2 upgradable M.2 slots. We have the one that houses the boot drive and then one that's unoccupied. So keep in mind, the reason I think that micro SD card reader was a good choice is because you don't have upgradable storage without swapping that boot drive. And for some more amateur computer users, and even I myself get nervous about swapping boot drives. So just think about that. I hang out with computers, lots of computers every single day. But for more amateur computer users, you can go ahead and upgrade your storage very easily by adding a micro SD card right into the side, and it fits flush into the device. Whereas with the G16, you have the opportunity to simply just add a drive into your system, which is very, very simple. You go ahead and take the bottom cover off, add it in, and you have more storage basically right away. So in that regard, we have the full-size SD card reader. We don't need to have that feature of upgrading the storage on the fly, in my opinion. So I really like how things tumble out between these two devices. Now, one thing to consider is going to be the battery life between these two devices. And the G14 for the past couple of years has been one of the best laptops for battery life. I have been able to see upwards, I'm not saying you might be able to get this yourself, but in my controlled testing, I've been able to see upwards of 12 hours of productivity, pass mark productivity benchmark test on this device. 10 hours of streaming video playback, 7 hours of Photoshop battery life, and 4 hours of video editing in Premiere Pro. Whereas for the G16, because of the much larger panel and the 240 hertz refresh rate on this device, and it has the higher power HX series processor, keep in mind that the G14 has the HS series processor, so it's gonna have better power consumption control compared to the HX. We'll see how it performs later, but as far as efficiency is concerned, the G14 is going to be more efficient. On the G16, we were able to get 9 hours of productivity battery life, 8 hours and 57 minutes of streaming video playback, 5 hours of Photoshop, and 3 hours and 58 minutes of video editing. So the biggest difference is going to be in those streaming video playback and in the productivity battery life. Now keep in mind, we have a 90 watt hour battery in the G16 and a 73 watt hour battery in the G14. Now speaking of the display, while we're talking about that, I mentioned a 240 hertz refresh rate. So what we have on the G16 is a 2.5K OLED 2560 by 1600 display at 64 hertz. 498 nits of screen brightness at 100% sRGB, 97% Adobe RGB, and 99% DCI-P3 at a delta E of 1.47. For the G14, we have a 3K Nebula HDR at 120 hertz refresh rate, 479 nits of screen brightness at 100% sRGB, 97% Adobe RGB, and 100% DCI-P3 at a delta E of 1.25. So very, very similar displays. Obviously, the sizing is going to be one of the biggest differences between these two. But it's really interesting. Even the bezel at the bottom there, you can see it goes straight across. So what you're getting is a wider and taller screen, same bezels around the outside, same glossy display. They have just made it bigger. So it's really cool. If you even look at the keyboard deck is even very, very similar. You can see the keyboard deck stayed the same size. They just gave you larger speakers on the G16 and of course, a larger trackpad. So spinning things down, checking out the trackpad there, you can see that we have a much larger trackpad on the G16, which could be a big advantage to creators that are on the go. I think that's one thing that the G14 is, it's a super portable device. They've given us as large of a trackpad as possible, which is amazing. In 2020 and 2021, this had more of that classic tiny trackpad. And then it became bigger and more evolved over the years. And now I think it has become the de facto for 14-inch gaming laptops. I mean, this thing is really what everything is chasing after. Large trackpad, beautiful display, nicely laid out keyboard deck, upward facing speakers. It just has all things going for it. So really, really exciting. Now, if you're considering the exact price and availability of these laptops, you can head down in the description below and click those links. If you do make a purchase, I'll get a small commission, but at no extra cost to you. But of course, that's what keeps this channel alive and the helpful content coming your way. Keep in mind, right now, the standard MSRP pricing for the G16 configured as you see it before me is about $22.99 compared to $19.99 for the G14 as you see it configured before me. Now, there are webcams along the top bezel. Here's a quick sample so you can see and hear what those are like. This is the webcam on the Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 from 2024, and a little sample of the audio for you as well. This is the webcam on the Asus ROG Zephyrus G16 from 2024, and a little sample of the audio for you as well. And of course, we talked about the keyboard deck and the trackpad. The trackpads have a nice, soft, but noticeable clicking sound. The keyboards have a medium key travel. It's not quite a long gaming laptop keyboard travel. It's not an ultrabook. It's nice medium key travel, nice snap back. I love how the keys are arranged. One of my favorite things about the ROG Zephyrus series is these removed keys. Quickly get to your volume, your mute mic button. I just like those because I feel like those are ones that can be, that you want to access quickly, kind of in a pinch, like, oh, it's loud, turn it down, oh my goodness. Or, mute the mic because my dog just came running in barking, or my child came in yelling and I'm on a video call, right? So those buttons are super nice to kind of cut off the audio coming out and going into the device, which is really, really cool. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weight and thickness. This is definitely something to consider. You can see the form factor is obviously going to be bigger on the G16. It's a bigger device, but the thickness is the exact same on these devices, which is so crazy. I mean, it might be a tiny, tiny point off, but as far as the normal eye can see. The thickness is going to be the same. The weight is obviously going to be a bit different because we have a much larger device, 2 whole inches bigger in the display. So there's the weight and thickness on the screen for you. All right, without further ado, let's get into the performance section of this video. Now keep in mind of the specifications for the G14, we have the Ryzen 9 8945HS with the RTX 4070 and 32 gigs of RAM. For the G16, we have the Ryzen AI 9 HX370, RTX 4070, and 32 gigs of RAM. However, one thing to point out about those RTX 4070s is the maximum graphics power on the G14 is 95 watts, whereas the maximum graphics power on the G16 is 105 watts. So in these benchmark tests, if you're wondering where the discrepancy is, a lot of it is the fact that the G14 is not allowing as much power to reach the GPU as the G16 is allowing to reach the GPU. Because of the smaller form factor, I'm guessing for thermal reasons, they are throttling that GPU a little bit comparatively between these two devices. Now going ahead and looking at the simulated benchmarks, you can see the G14 and the G16, they're pretty close, but the G16 definitely leads the pack in the simulated benchmarks, especially in single core performance on Cinebench 2024. Now going ahead and getting away from the simulated benchmarks because real world to me is where it's at. You can see in 3D modeling, Autodesk 3ds Max, Autodesk Maya, and PTC Creo, they're pretty close. They definitely have a leader coming out of the G16, but they are still very close. The one thing that really stands out to me though is that in SolidWorks, the G14 has a little bit better score. I mean, it's nothing to write home about. It's not this amazing score, but it is a better score. So that was quite surprising to me. Now, as we move on into Photoshop, the clear winner by more than 1,000 points is the G16, 8866 versus 7248 on the G14. Definitely something to consider if you're a Photoshop user. You'll get a good bit more performance out of the G16. Now, looking at the Premiere Pro export time, 2 minutes and 19 seconds for the 4K export out of the G14, 3 minutes and 3 seconds out of the G16. Now, that's a 9-minute 4K clip placed into Premiere Pro and exported out at full quality 4K settings. Looking at 6K B-RAW, 15 minutes and 34 seconds out of the G16, 15 minutes and 19 seconds out of the G14. So if you're looking for a 6K laptop, the export times are going to be better on the G14. However, when we get into playback, 43 drop frames for B-RAW, 1,136 for 6K red footage for the G14 versus the G16 at 0 drop frames for 6K B-RAW and 952 for 6K red footage. So slightly better playback coming out of the G16, slightly better export times coming out of the G14. So in regards to performance, honestly, there's not a big difference between these two. One of the biggest things that I see between these two laptops is obviously going to be the larger display, better speakers, the larger trackpad, and you have a 240 hertz refresh rate on the G16. But you're going to have slightly better battery life out of the G14. Still going to have good speakers, still going to have a large trackpad in regards to a 14-inch device, but you're going to have a 120 hertz refresh rate. So if that is important to you, then the G16 will definitely be the way to go. Another thing to consider is the upgrade path, a little bit more upgrade path in regards to the storage. However, you do have that micro SD card reader on the G14, which allows you to expand your storage on the go and can be advantageous to you. Punch for punch, it's really going to be up to you which one is a right fit for you because they're both stellar devices with great performance offering. Links are in the description below if you're ready to make a purchase, as always, or click or tap the screen here if you want more videos to help you with your buying decision. I'll see you in the next one.